But right now, let us welcome to the show guest for the night, Martyn Bomber Bradbury. Bomber, good evening to you, sir.
Kia ora, comrades. How are you?
Yeah,
How you
doing
doing,
good.
bud?
Any thoughts around Nicola Willis being humanised in the house today?
Oh, it's just, it was a great line. Question mark is whether or not they did it on purpose. I think people want to. I think this election people want to rumble, and I think humanizing it all is important
Yeah.
because I think the tone of this election is going to get very dark pretty quick.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it is going to be an ugly election, and I think it feels like, we had the be kind election and let's be nice to each other election, and now it's like the only way that I think Labor's going to get near it is if, remember Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. I think this one's going to be in New Zealand, when they go low, we'll go lower. I think that's going to be what they're doing.
Blood for the blood god.
All right. Cool. Let's have a look at this conversation, Bomber. Thank you for joining us, by the way. I really appreciate having you on.
Absolute pleasure, gentlemen.
We've been using some of your Tuesday night stuff every now and again because we've been enjoying watching it on the show.
Very kind.
And pointing people back to the working groups podcast. I always want to say working people. Working group. Okay.
Certainly not working people.
No. We've been having this conversation for quite a while, Bomber, about the ideological vote versus the strategic vote. And I have to be honest, I've been someone who's been more sort of in favour of the strategic vote. But there's been some things recently of mostly based in America, watching what's going on in America with the choices they've got there, like between Biden and Trump, if that's going to be. I'm struggling now to think, for me, if I was in that thing, about voting strategically, because it's like, between a dumpster fire and a Portaloo fire sort of thing. It's like at some stage when we vote strategically, we're then upholding a broken system rather than ideologically. And do we have to keep doing that, or do we have to break the system to make the whole thing better? So this has been the conversation we've sort of been having here, Bomber. And I'll play a clip that I actually played last night. So for you guys who have come back, you'll have seen this. But this was a conversation with Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. He kind of nutshelled it quite well, talking about sort of how desperate Democrats are not to have a kind of centrist Democrat in. I'll let him do it first. It's only 45 seconds and then we'll chat.
If Trump is as bad as I think he is, would I want to run a super weak old man who doesn't even want to campaign against him?
Yeah.
A guy whose popularity is oftentimes in the 30s? Here's a giant lie of the mainstream media. Only Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. Wait, why? First of all, tons of people can beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump's in the 30s in approval rating. Jim Jablowski can beat Donald Trump. The only people who can't beat Donald Trump are establishment Democrats who are deeply unpopular because they're fakes and they're phonies, right? So they say, oh, Biden beat him last time. He beat him by 43,000 votes in 3 swing states. It doesn't matter how much he won the popular vote by. The Electoral College, he only won by the skin of his teeth, and he was 15 points higher at that point. The Democrats are walking into a slaughter with their eyes wide open and saying, I would rather lose to Trump than have a progressive as our candidate.
So that's the point at the end. Now, listen, I know Cenk is a bit of a controversial figure amongst those on the left, the progressive left and the left, etc. But the point being, and this is the ideological versus strategic, that the point he's making is that those on the left in America would rather lose to Trump than have a more progressive candidate in. And that's where I want to pick up on the conversation and see what you think, not necessarily in America. Maybe it's not quite as obvious in New Zealand, although on the right, there are a lot of people talking about voting for these minor parties, the Democracy New Zealand's, and is that going to be a strategic or an ideological decision they have to make? But what do you think, Marty, about the idea of voting strategically versus voting ideologically and how we should treat it?
See, I wish that there was actually that much intellectual rigor going into people's decisions about what they're voting for. I don't believe that since the creation of social media, we're doing a lot of thinking. I think we're doing a lot of feeling. I think that there are going to be people in the electorate who feel so personal about certain issues that regardless of the economic backlash or damage it might cause them and their interests, they are going to die on a hill for this particular issue. And they're going to die on a hill for this particular issue because when we debate in social media, it becomes such a personal knife fight and such a negative experience that you're not really voting for the things that you believe in. You're voting because you hate that other person. There's a proxification, I think, going on. And what the Young Turks are sort of saying there is these bloody centrists, they're so awful, they're so phony. It's not like centrists want Trump to win. I think most people would be horrified by a Trump victory. What they're trying to do is find a middle ground amongst voters that don't that hate each other less than they hate the enemy. I think that we live in a very subjective rage environment now, where objectivity, rational thought, standing back and thinking, consider that's not the issue. It's an emotional feeling, and people are so angry and so fearful post-COVID. I mean, we just went through a universal shared experience. You imagine how rare universal shared experiences are in a society. We all sacrificed. Now, many of us sacrifice far more unevenly than others because we're an unequal, society, and those inequalities are exploding, and they're causing fear, and they're causing alienation. We're more connected than ever before, but we're more lonely. And I think that we're now in this age of subjective rage. It's just about what you hate and what makes you feel angry. I don't think people are philosophically or strategically voting. They're emotionally voting.
Chewy?
Yeah, no, in broad strokes, I think I agree with that. I mean, for people like us, we get together and we split hairs and we think about how we're going to move the needle or how we're going to punish our team because they haven't quite played it how we would have wanted it to. Certainly that's the way that I'm thinking about Labour at the moment, with rolling out wealth taxes and ruling out this, that, and the other thing, and acting like they're negotiating from a position of strength that I do not believe they have. So I'm like, I'm not going to vote for you. With the American experience, I think because they don't even have those other options. Like, they don't have a third or a fourth party that they can vote for.
Right.
The last election, they're like, I want to vote for Bernie Sanders. He's the man for me. But he was never going to take out the Democrats. He was never going to get their nomination. So as soon as he was knocked out, people went, fuck it, I'm just not voting. There's no one there that represents me. So why should I vote for the system that I'm not agreeing with?
Right. And it's particularly hard, I think, in America, because really what you're being asked for there is not to vote for the candidate that fills you with hope. You're simply being asked to not vote for the worst option and have the worst option, right? This isn't about the best option. This is about the least worst option. And it's very easy to become deeply cynical when that's all democracy's promising, right? The least worst version. Jesus, that's not much to get up in the morning for.
Yeah.
And that cycle, when you think about, say, Obama's campaign, that was, hope and a brave new future. Look, a black man. To go, right, and now this time your choice is this orange gibbon and this decrepit old man. It's a real downshift.
The orange gibbon's a bit of a decrepit old man as well. So it's the orange gibbon, decrepit old man, and the decrepit old. I mean, I always think about how old is he going to be? 88? Is Biden going to be 88 at the end of his term? Something like that. You don't give your remote control to your 88-year-old grandfather, let alone the nuclear button.
I think that Biden won because after 4 years of Trump, America needed an emotional support Labrador, and that's what he is. I'm not. I don't mean that to be facetious, and that's not to give any crap to Biden, because when you actually look at what he's been able to pass, his legislative agenda is remarkable. And it's remarkable because there's an old school Democrat, sit down, let's cut a deal Democrat, So he has been able to get a lot through. But after the trauma of Trump, I mean, we all lived this, right? Waking up each day going, what crazy ass thing is he going to do today? And you never knew. And I think after that 4 years of that trauma, the national mood of America was just to have an emotional support peacock to hold on to love. And he's been able to do that. He gives good pats and, he tongues out and everything. But I think that Trump poses such an existential threat to not just America, because Lord knows what he'd do in a second term. He has shown us that he is willing to use violence, street violence and thuggery with the January 6th insurrection. And let's be clear, if that was an insurrection, that was an attempted putsch. He's prepared to go there in a way that terrifies everyone else. If he got back in, it would be a threat to American democracy. And I think that we could see a very unique brand of American fascism.
Yeah. Before we go on, Chewy, speaking about Labradors and pets and stuff, could you get your dog in the background to get rid of that pornography that we're saying, please? It's not appropriate how the dog is lying.
It's a very relaxed
on the camera. It's a little bit inappropriate to how the dog is lying in the background. Hey, let me continue this conversation. Can we continue this conversation? One of the things, and look, I'm not saying this as a necessarily supporter or huge fan of TYT, but one of the points that they were making in that was the idea of politicians grabbing onto minority views. And like when a politician or a political party grabs a hold of something that like 2% of the country wants, that's not populist politics, and that's not strategically good politics. It is the politician then doing ideology. There was another one of the poll. There was part of the polling released today from NewsHub that asked the question: do you think the government is focused on the issues that matter to you, the current government? 1 in 3 people said yes. 2/3 of people said no. I'd be keen to hear from both of you guys why you think that is, because when Hipkins was asked about this, he talked about, the cost of living crisis, and that sounds like that is the thing they're focusing on, should be focusing on, but there's not the people don't think that's what they're focused on. People think they're focusing on other things, perhaps things that society think are a more minority view. What is this Labor government focusing on the right things, the wrong things? Is that a fair assertion that 2/3 of us think that they're focusing on the wrong things? And where again do we come back to that ideology versus strategy when it comes to what policies we're putting forward? And sure, you've already mentioned capital gains tax, wealth tax. They've said no to that, although all the polling says that's popular. So what the fuck's up with that?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I mean, that's certainly my button issue is that we're going, we've got all of these challenges ahead of us and no solutions. And I want to turn around and go, you tried to find solutions and you changed the law so the IRD could find them. And then they found them. And then you went, there's nothing we can do. We've got no ideas. It's infuriating. And I've had this going from, the first majority government that we've had under MMP completely whiff things, absolutely outside the goal, that could have been really progressive and really made a big difference in a lot of people's lives, and they're just timid. And so I'm going, well, I'm a Labour supporting Green voter. Every time the Greens do something, it's not everything. Not everything, but the majority of things, and the majority of people saying things from the Green Party, I go, yes, that's right. You've articulated that correctly.
Isn't it ironic that it's the Greens, the hippie wannabe Greens that seem to be the ones coming out at the moment, Bomber, with costed policy and research behind what they're saying? No one else is. The Greens are. Those hippies from the 90s who wanted to ban smacking and smoke dope and wear hemp suits, they're the ones coming out with costed policies and research to back them up. What the fuck are we on?
It's interesting, isn't it, that those numbers about does the government care about the things that impact me? Well, right now we have 12.5% food inflation. That is some of the highest food inflation we've had in 30 years. We have mortgage rates now for first-time home buyers that, my Lord, people are having to find $600 extra a week to just pay their bloody debts. We're stuck in gridlock. We feel that we're going backwards. Most people aren't ideological and political. They're working bloody 60, 70 hours a week. They're exhausted when they get home. They're trying to find time with their family. And all they feel every single time they go to the supermarket is they're getting mugged. That's all they feel. They feel like they're getting a punch in the face every single time they go in there. And then when the government says, oh, well, we're going to do something on co-governance, or we're doing something on trans rights, or we're doing something on this, people go, hey, my lived experience is suffering and pain, and I feel like I'm going backwards. The promise of democracy is you can look into the face of your child and know they're going to get a better deal of it than you. And right now, people don't feel that they can look into the face of their child and get that deal. And so they feel like their lives are going backwards and they're being hurt. And when Chippy comes out and says, I'm here for the bread and butter, and you're going, well, mate, I can't afford the bread and butter, mate. What are you talking about? And unless, and this comes back to the Tibbinless, the problem fundamentally with Labour is they're not prepared to challenge the under-regulated neoliberal economic system within New Zealand. It's a very free market. There isn't an attempt to regulate it. We can see that most dynamically in the supermarket duopoly, where these two huge behemoths are just able to rob the country every single day of the week because of their monopoly position in the market. And we give the Commerce Commission the tools of God and the hammer of God to go after corporations and smack them up because they're the only power that can do that. The Commerce Commission, remember, originally said the dominance is so out of scale and nutty that we actually need to break up the industry and take a 30%, just take 30% of the industry off of them and give it to a third partner. That's how extremely warped it is. And because Labour didn't expect to win in 2017 and they didn't expect to win an actual majority in 2020, they had no 100-day plan, legislative plan, to hit the ground running. Because the two forces that will stymie any progress is the self-serving public service who only care about money for their fiefdoms and their next glass palace. And then, of course, the consultants, the corporate consultants who immediately get involved and make sure their dominance, their market dominance and whatever they're benefiting from never gets touched. Those are the two competing forces. And you've only got 100 days after you get elected to ram that stuff through, hold it for a year and defend it, and then go to the election with it. Because what happens is when people get used to better services, like when you give the people free transport, they want free transport. When you give them a better supermarket system that reduces the cost, they want that. And so once the people get used to the state stepping in and doing mass things for the benefit of us all, we like that and we want that and we want to keep that. And National and the right can't cut it back. So there's this constant struggle. And if you're not prepared to do it in the first 100 days, it doesn't happen. Doesn't happen.
Speaking of what the right's going to do, Marty, here's a question for you. You're smarter than probably both of us combined in this whole world. Let me ask you this, because this is something that we kind of fell into about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We were talking about those kinds of policies that are set in place and then the country wants them, right? Just kind of what you've talked about, working for families, interest-free student loans, the health system, state housing. And as we went through these kind of foundational legislative changes in New Zealand, we went, fuck, they're all from the left.
Yeah.
And we've been struggling, like genuinely looking for anything from the right that has been implemented from day one that everyone in the country has gone, like John Key came along and went, we'll keep interest-free student loans, we'll keep working for families because he had to. I can't think of a policy or a legislative change that National or the right has brought in that the whole country with one voice has gone, don't you dare fucking touch that. And what does that say about the right in politics? There's an old saying that the left make policy and the right respond to policy. And I wonder how true that actually is.
You're absolutely on the money, and you're completely right. You'd have to go back to Muldoon because he had a completely different philosophical perspective of what the National Party should be, and saw it as a state responsibility to step in and provide these services. Since the Muldoon age, it's gone very, very free market, very, very much privatization. The state doesn't have the answers. Let the free market decide. the political project of the right, and this is ACT and this is national, is to starve the state of revenue in the first place so that there's no money to redistribute, right?
Right.
So if the state doesn't have the money to begin with, can't redistribute it. So that's always the game. Cut back the ability of the state to raise revenue, tax cuts, privatization, selling stuff off, do that to the absolute maximum and limit the state's ability to provide. Because if people aren't being provided by the state, so the philosophy goes, they'll have to do it on their own. And the problem here is because we've gone so far to the right, always to a very minimalist state approach. I mean, even where we do have regulations, there's only like a handful of inspectors, right? Like there's a handful of inspectors for healthy homes. There's a handful of inspectors for all of the migrant worker exploitations that occur in New Zealand. There's only a few. So it's a very, very lightly regulated market that allows businesses to dominate, become duopolies, monopolies, oligopolies. And because we're on an island, it becomes monopoly rental. So you've got very set ideas and very set interests. And they refuse point blank to be challenged. That's why ACT and National are raising so much money from the billionaire class right now, because they're wanting their interests protected by not having regulation, by loosening up all of these requirements that Labour have poured on. So that's the constant stress, and that's the constant pull and sort of tug of war between the left and the right. Because the right generally can't argue a particularly convincing argument as to why you should just, get back a McDonald's Happy Meal once a year in the form of a tax cut, and we make shitloads. Because that's a very difficult argument to sell people. They're reliant on culture war stuff. And you've seen, certainly with ACT, they have just dominated this culture war issue. And because I think woke middle-class activists, who are very alienating at times, have pushed so many of our brothers over to the right, you've got guys who are voting ACT without really knowing what the bloody hell ACT are going to implement. And so you've got the right playing culture war games and not wanting an economic debate, because actually when you sit back and think about it, the demarcation of power in a liberal progressive democracy is the 1% wealthy plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. And the moment we all realize, hold on, 90% of us are all on the same side here, you buggers need to pay more to pay for the infrastructure and the social wraparound services that this society requires, and you should start paying your fair share now. Because once politics simply gets to that point, the right always lose.
Shall we? Do you want to? I'm going to play one more clip, one more idea from this polling from yesterday, but you just jump in now, bro.
Yeah, I must admit, since the Greens tax policy came out, whenever I'm in a discussion, someone says, Labor's had their chance, I'm gonna vote National. My whole response to that is, do you make $200,000 a year? And the answer is invariably no. Why? Then why are you voting National? There's like all of the things that you're complaining about.
Yeah.
Can be solved by that question.
Yeah.
We talk. You mentioned Muldoon and all of that sort of stuff, and someone in the chat said Muldoon, New Zealand's last socialist prime minister.
Yes,
that made me.
He really is. He really was.
So I think the 1980s are really pivotal for the New Zealand political scheme, right? Because you had all of that. The country was almost bankrupt. We did all of these big things that were maybe a good idea, maybe not, that sort of thing. And then somebody got a book called Neoliberalism, and everybody lost their fucking minds. They sold everything. And then that was the new standard. Everything got compared to the bad old days of the 1980s, and that was Labour's fault. The farmers have never forgiven the losing of subsidies.
Right.
They have never, ever forgotten that.
Yep.
And every time the government expands, like you've got the right talking about the level of bureaucracy that we have, it's harking back to the 70s and the 80s and flying on and all of that sort of stuff. Even though we have trimmed back government oversight, as you said, we can put in all the laws that we like, but if we don't have people inspecting and enforcing them, what the fuck's the point?
Right.
Labour said that they were going to bring out a supermarket. I'm paraphrasing here, a supermarket commissar, which is exactly what it should have been called. And then the supermarket said, "Oh, we're terribly scared of that. Okay, we're just going to adjust our prices a little bit." And you've forgotten, and good, prices go back up.
Right.
So, and then everything that Luxon's saying, like he said it around genetic organisms. He said it about this roading project that he brought in. It's all going to be safe because we're going to have a ministry or something to overlook it. But we're getting rid of bureaucracy. But here's a new one. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, and I'm just like, I know that like people like us watch all of these things, and we compare all of these things, and we've got it all filed away, and we go, yes, but Mr. Luxon, on May 27th, you said this, but everybody else isn't.
Yeah.
Of course.
They're going to make their. I mean, we've been saying this all year, right? That they're going to make their voting decision based on their last shopping bill the week of the election.
Right.
And it's all over. And you can debate the pros and cons, but it's just when people are hurting, they'll take another.
Exactly.
They'll take the other guy.
Yeah.
Anyone but Jacinda. That kind of vibe. Anyone but Jacinda. Make Jacinda go away, and so we'll just vote for whoever it is. Like you were saying, Bomber, without actually like we had on Scotty Reeve this week, who was the Anglican priest who got kicked out of the Stop Co-Governance Julian Batchelor thing, and he told us that he sat down because it was a Samoan Christian couple that organised that rally in his neighbourhood, and he sat down with them afterwards, and he explained to them who Julian Batchelor was, and they were shocked. And it's like they didn't have all the information to make the decision. And then once they found out, they were like, what the fuck? It's like, Brexit turned into, what was it? Remorse. The next day we're talking about remorse after Brexit. It's like, get the information. And like, I like the idea of voting, but I'm scared of the idea of ill-informed voters. I mean, we hear about in America, the uneducated voters are the ones Trump loves the most. Of course he does, because they never question anything.
Yeah. But I think on the left, we have to think about how are we bringing brothers and sisters into the fold? How are we keeping this broad church enough? Because I think sometimes the activists get us into pure temple dogma where you have to agree to a whole bunch of things before you're allowed in the door. And that's not the way it can be. We on the left have to be the embracing side of the fence. We have to, I just don't believe that you can lead the people if you don't love the people. And I think that there's so much pain going on out there in our communities. People are struggling economically in ways they didn't and haven't had before. And I think that post-COVID, there's still so much shockwave. And there are parts of our community who feel alienated for the first time in their entire existence in New Zealand, who took a stand on something, whether it's anti-vax or anti-mandate, and they suddenly felt excluded. And they have gone poisonous on that exclusion. And there are a whole bunch of other parts of society that feel that they're being excluded, while the very wealthy and the property speculators and the bank managers are laughing all the way back to their banks. And I just think if you're going to be serious about politics, you've got to seriously challenge the powerful. You've got to take money off of them, and you've got to do the redistribution so that the people believe in the process and they believe in the system. I mean, if we were able to give every single child in New Zealand a free breakfast and a free lunch, nutritious, not some bullshit for McDonald's, I'm talking nutritious, good New Zealand Kiwi food, right? The harvest of our own country made in our own fields, shared with our children. If we did that, that would do more to reduce truancy. That would do more to create goodwill between parents and schools and the students than any single thing else, I mean, I think we need to be more generous of spirit. We need to be kinder to individuals and crueler to corporations.
Luxon's already earmarked that, because like Chewy said, we do this every day. So I can remember the bit we did about Luxon coming for your feminine hygiene products and talking about free lunches in schools as a negative. So that's already, but everyone else has missed that. And to be honest, even though we've filed it away, Luxon's never going to talk to us, so we'll never get a chance to answer him about that. Which means going through the halls of power, someone throws him the daily headline news, and no one, even the guys who have access, don't go into it. Other than credit where credit's due, Jack Tame seems to hold him pretty much to account when he talks to him.
Yeah, he's very good.
Very, very good. Hey, let me just move to this one thing. I'm going to keep you all night, Bomber.
I don't want to take up too much of the show, gentlemen. But it's
dude, it's this week. This Thursday night's becoming a bit like this, isn't it, Chewy?
It's only a 60-minute, 90-minute.
Our 60-minute show was always made up of 3 30-minute parts, Bomber. We don't know quite how we do that, but we tend to do most nights. No, we're not good at maths. I want to play a clip from everyone's favourite financial beneficiary of the ACT Party. That's Jenna Lynch at TV3. Thanks to her husband's salary. But this is one of the other things that has come in, and I've got one question about it for you, Bomber, because I can't fucking figure it out. This is on, I'll just play it.
More bad news for Chris Hipkins this morning.
Oh, sorry, what I should do is you should listen to the language, okay? Bad news for Chris Hipkins, right? Listen to the language. That's the first thing that's really important. And this is about performance of the leaders, right? Bad news for Hipkins. You've already heard what's his name, Bridge, the host of the show, talking about Labor taking a tumble. So far I've had taking a tumble and bad news, and this is talking about performance. Keep listening to this.
We ask in our poll how people think each of the leaders are performing, and Chris Hipkins has taken a dive. 49.5% of people think Chris Hipkins is performing well. That is down 6.1 points. 26.7% think he is performing poorly. That is up 8.5 points. So neither of those metrics going Chris Hipkins' way.
No, but not necessarily any better for Luxon.
No,
right.
He's taken a little bit of a bump on those who think he's performing well.
So positive language about him. These numbers here are actually wrong. They've fucked up their graphics. But one of the points I wanted to make, this is TV3, the AM show, talking about Christopher Hipkins and Labor taking a tumble, bad news, taking a dive. Neither of those metrics are going Hipkins' way. Yet he is still far better regarded at 49.5% than Luxon at 37%. Yet when Luxon comes up, they're like, no, not so bad for Luxon. And I'll tell you something, it's so much easier to be the leader of the opposition because this is about how they're performing. You have to do fucking nothing as the leader of the opposition other than going, they suck. So what people are saying is he can't even fucking do that, Bomber.
First of all, Jenna Lynch, I have an enormous amount of respect for her work and her as a journalism because she's ruthless. She's just absolutely throat-slashingly ruthless, and I like that. I think Mike Hosking, I disagree with literally everything that man says, but he's the hardest interviewer from the right in the game. Jenna's also like that. Yes, her partner is with the ACT Party. But she's still I think a very valuable journalist and a very valuable point of view. And of course, it's right wing. It's TV3. They're a private company.
Can I just offer one point of order, Your Honour, please? Just one point of order.
Yeah,
I've asked TV3 about this, and the only thing I've never seen in Jenna Lynch, and this is my criticism, is she's never been ruthless on ACT.
Oh, no. Well, hey, look, we've all got our blind spots, right? Absolutely. And I give you that. You're absolutely right. I'm not expecting the gospel truth from the mount from Jenna Lynch, but I understand the perspective she's going to be coming from. But you're right. It is a negative game. And what's most important about those bloody polls, which they never point out, is that and this is over the years and years and years we've been doing these polls, they always underpoll Labor by 4 points, and they always overpoll National by 5 points. And that's with a margin of error of 3%. The number could be fucking way out of... Now, certainly walking in, you're going, oh, that doesn't look too good. But, I mean, the odds on are still that it's going to be a Labour, Green, Māori Party government. That's the odds, right? Now, yes, there's been some distortion right now, but the numbers, if you look back, that's where they're going. And I don't think... I think this is going to be decided in the debates. I think people want to see Luxon up against Chippy. I think they're still waiting to see some actual policy from Labor. If Labor, I mean, it's been leaked that they were going to remove GST or fruit and vegetable, but if they went a step further and actually came back to the market and said, "Hey, folks, we know the cost of living is crucifying us. We're going to remove GST off all food and vegetables and keep it to just supermarkets, corner dairies, what have you. Don't include takeaways or just supermarkets." You actually you show then the people who are voting for you that you're hearing their pain.
Yeah.
So Labour's still going to come up with some bloody policy, and I think Chippy will absolutely knock the shit out of Luxon in those debates. I think Luxon has a glass jaw. I think as a CEO, he barks orders and people do what he wants. Not a politician. He's never had a punch in the face. And I think Chris Hipkins will provide a punch in the face very early in those debates, and you'll go, whoa, where's this Chippy been? And I think people are going to watch that. I think that what you're going to see, particularly with the polarization of ACT being in double-digit figures, that's an existential threat to the National Party. It's a demographic change. There are more millennials and Gen Xers voting in this election numerically than boomers for the first time in New Zealand's history. National is an older demographic. If you're looking at under 40s, they're voting for the right. And I think that if ACT are able to get double digits and get into Parliament with that kind of number, they'll just slowly start strangling the National Party off. So I think there's a lot of dynamism going on in the electorate, a lot of demographic change, which is going to make it very hard for the right to win.
Wow. I think the one thing that always seems to be worldwide, Bomber, when it comes to politics, is the right is very well organised and the left is very fractured. So I think what will happen, we've had a bit of a tagline in this show for the last couple of months, Bomber, which is if the left votes, the left wins, because the way that the left loses is they don't vote. And
Absolutely.
so I think that's what keeps it even 50-50, because I'm confident from all the numbers all over the world that by far and away the majority of voters in every Western civilization is left-wing voters. That's where the policies are, that's where the voters are. But the left are also the guys who do, as kind of Chewy said tonight, get a bit upset because there's no capital gains tax or wealth tax and go, fuck it, I'm not going to vote then, which brings us right back lovely to the start of our conversation about ideological voting versus strategic conversation. So yeah, I saw Chewy's eyes light up when you talked about being a left wing. You got a bit excited. You barred up a little bit, didn't you, Chewy? Just slightly when you heard Bomber say that.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important. I just want to say it's really important that that platforms like yours, which allow men to be able to debate and discuss things in a very free place, and feel included and connected to the left. I think those are bloody important. And if we don't have those networks of information out there, we're going to lose an entire generation of our guys to ACT, and not so much National, but certainly to ACT, and who are voting it as a protest vote without really any understanding of just how extreme David Seymour really, really is. And I think the big debates that we need to have in our circles of friends as men is saying, well, hold on, do you know, if you go down the ACT policy, that they're going to do this, and this, and these things are going to cause enormous conflict. I don't think New Zealanders want more conflict. I think we're trying to find a place where we can maybe forgive each other and heal and find the common ground, because on these shaky little isles on the edge of the bloody Great Pacific Ocean, we're all we have. No one else is going to come and save us. If we can't work this shit out amongst ourselves and find a way to make New Zealand resilient in the face of some incredibly heavy economic challenges, and let's not forget the climate change, Lord, that is going to just completely upend things. If we can't find a way to work amongst ourselves, what's the point? What is the point?
Yeah, I think that's everything boils down to that for me personally, is when we look at everything that's in front of us, and in some cases literally on our doorstep, we can't look behind us for solutions. And it really seems like let's get New Zealand back on track with ideas that we tried 4 years ago and 8 years ago is just reckless, it's dangerous, and it's ideological. It's not based on facts or reason. And I think, again, well, you were talking earlier about people voting on feelings. That's why it's culture war, because that's always going to provoke a response, right? So we want to provoke people. And I guess the other thing that I'm really concerned about, and this always comes out when we talk about polls and the language that they use about results and whatever questions that they're asking, is if it's day after day after day of bad news for Chippy, and look at this doom spiral that Labor's in, you just get people that go, oh, okay, so it's already decided. I won't bother
Yeah.
voting because
Yeah.
I don't want to vote for a loser. I assume my
Right.
name will be on the list somewhere as the guy that votes for losers, and then women
Right.
won't like me, and I'll die alone.
And so, Chewy, not to interrupt you, because you come back to it. But that's then when you hear on TV3 taking a tumble, bad news, taking a dive, neither of those metrics going Hipkins' way. They're just echoing in mainstream media what you're saying, Chewy. Sorry, keep going, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So I this is my pledge to you. I am going to be insufferable as we get closer to the election. I will be going, I don't care who you vote for, just fucking vote. Because we've seen the other, like in the local body stuff, right? When you get such a low turnout, it gets skewed heavily one way and you get absolute gremlins being voted into office with the most fucked, cooked ideas out the gate. And if that happens at a national level, it's dangerous.
All right. Well, we should probably wrap up and let you go, Marty. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? There was one text that I wanted to highlight. Hopefully no one will take offence to this. Adam said, I just wanted to know where you guys got the DeLorean. Great to see future Pat on the show tonight. People say that about us all the time, Bomber. They used to hear my voice on ZB and say, are you Bomber? And I'm like, no. So
We
I just want to reiterate. I just want to reiterate how very important you guys are to the media ecosystem. That there needs to be places like this where this stuff can actually be thrashed out and debated and talked. I think New Zealanders want to engage in politics and they want to share ideas. And they want a space where they can talk about those ideas without anyone getting cancelled. That we live in quite a self-censored environment and we're almost frightened of engaging because what if I say the wrong thing or what if I got the wrong idea? And I think that having spaces like this where you can actually, where it's safe enough to be able to thrash those ideas out, that's essential. And it also creates that community of people who you rely on. And you go, well, I heard them say this, and I like that and I understand that. And you actually create the kind of fabric and the weaves in a democracy that you need to make the bloody thing work. So I just want to tip my hat to you guys and what you're doing and achieving with the show.
well, there's also people tipping their hat to you, Gareth. Here, Bomber. JN says, very interesting. Thank you, Bomber. Lots of people in the chat thanking you for coming on board. We want to have you back, Marty, at some other stages.
Hey, anytime,
yeah.
guys. Please, it's been an absolute thrill and privilege. And I just think getting into the election and getting close to the election, you're just going to have to be doing this maybe a couple of times a night.
Well, we're going 4 times a week at the moment. We think that's enough for us at the time being.
Wait, I think you need to get weekly.
Well, we're gonna start doing some live stuff, I think, as well around the election. We're probably going to do drinking games on
one
the
of us
nights
may die during the debate.
during the debates. So we got to come up with we got to come up with our bingo card that says things like the squeezed middle and public-private partnerships will be one we could do, Chewy. And every time consume. We're gonna have to figure it out.
Consequences. Outcomes.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, Bomber, and everyone's thankful that you came on board, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Sweet as. Be well.